Hey there, what's happening? This is Isai Rodriguez, host of the Datsplanation podcast, where I cater to the professional working man, 40 and above, who's looking to make positive changes to his health, lose weight, and become stronger overall through simple lifestyle changes. I'm here to share inspiration, tips, and proven lessons that I've personally learned and lived through in my 40 plus years on this beautiful blue planet. So today we'll start the discussion off by talking about the topic, stop ignoring this treatable cause of high blood pressure in our first segment. And then we'll move on to our second segment and talk about what you need to know if you can't touch your toes. And before we get into that, if you'd like to continue the conversation, then get on over to podcast.datsplanation.com/VIP to get on the VIP Insiders community, where I share more entertaining behind-the-scenes stories, tips, and hacks that'll keep you feeling younger each and every day. That's podcast.datsplanation.com/VIP. Again, that's podcast.datsplanation.com/VIP. Be in the know starting right now. Also, don't forget to rate me on Apple Podcasts or wherever it is that you're listening to this episode right now. And leave me a nice, fat, juicy 5-star review and some absolutely beautiful words of why you love the show so much. It really helps me get the word out, and it's honestly the one place where your vote truly matters. And now, let's move into our first segment with Healthy Conversations. And so, in this week's installment of Healthy Conversations, we're talking about a very easily treatable cause of high blood pressure that's oftentimes not caught on time or not even tested for, you know what I mean? So people whose blood pressure is considered, quote unquote, hard to control might have another condition that's the actual reason for this problem. So a new study highlighted another one of these chicken versus the egg, chicken or the egg type of scenario in the whole blood pressure management thing. And what they're saying is that the testing, that testing for a specific disease that's been associated with, this hard to control blood pressure, this testing isn't even happening, and they're speculating that it's most likely because doctors think it's way too rare of a thing. But here's the catch-22 in this whole picture, this whole story, is that if more people were actually tested, then they say that we'd actually discover that it's not as rare as they're, currently thinking that it actually is. It's kind of like the whole ADD or, ADHD thing of the past where so first of all, you have to understand that I'm kind of old enough to remember a time when kids or even adults, I suppose, that were hyperactive or couldn't pay attention for long periods of time. I remember when these kids would simply be written off as troublemakers or daydreamers. Like I remember plain as day because I was one of them and I still am, you know what I mean? I was clinically diagnosed, but that's neither here nor there. But it's kind of the same thing, But once science caught up, once science caught up to them and we started actually testing for these conditions, then suddenly we started noticing that, hey, this is actually a lot more common than we originally thought of. This is not what we thought of originally, this a lot more people have this condition than don't. That's kind of what's going on here with this blood test. But it's actually a little worse in this case because according to several doctors, they say that they're all taught in medical school that if a patient has high blood pressure and low levels of potassium in the blood, or if a patient isn't seeing, improvements after blood pressure treatment, they say that you should check for what a condition that's called primary aldosteronism. So like they're being taught this in medical school, but apparently they're not practicing it in the office. Now, I don't know. Have any of you been actually tested for this primary aldosteronism? Say that 3 times fast. I had to practice that a bit. But let me know in the comments if you've been tested for this. I'm really curious to hear your experiences on this. Because the study said that, again, that it's universally taught in medical school how this condition, or better said, this disease has been found to be, it's been found to be a definitive cause of high blood pressure in some people. So basically, they reviewed data. So this is what they did. Like, they basically reviewed data from military veterans diagnosed with what they refer to as treatment-resistant hypertension. So basically, it's exactly what this sounds like. People that were treated, or I should say diagnosed with hypertension, then treated, but had no positive results from the treatment itself that they received. Now the data, the data that they reviewed from a veterans hospital between the years of 2000 and 2017 showed that fewer than 2% of people who should have been evaluated for this condition, the primary aldosteronism, like only 2% of the people that were evaluated were actually tested. Now that's a pretty low number considering the total amount of people that were part of the research to begin with. But they also found that the chances of them receiving this much needed evaluation was a lot higher when the patient talked about their hypertension with the specialist, like an endocrinologist, So if they had the chance to actually talk to a specialist, the probability of them having the test done to catch this disease, this condition, went up dramatically. And the funny thing is that when I read the most recent blood pressure guidelines from the AHA, the American Heart Association, which was long and exhaustive, let me add that in there, and boring if you ask me. But they actually recommend testing for the condition in the same situations that are taught in medical school. How crazy is that? Think about that. There really seems to be like an educational gap where some doctors think it's too complicated to test, to test people for this, or, maybe they don't even know that they should be thinking about testing people for this. I mean, some are, but many aren't. And it's tough to tell a doctor that they're not in the right, and that they might be wrong. I've always found that's a really tough ordeal. That's a tough task to complete. And I read where one physician actually explained how the most important take-home message for clinicians is that if you're really struggling to control a patient's blood pressure, consider getting a hypertension expert. Get them involved. Someone who has special training on the topic. That's the golden nugget here. If you're like, I'm not here preaching to doctors that they should do their job better. That's not what I'm here for. I'm actually here for you, the professional man 40 and above, but that's the golden nugget here. If you're struggling with your blood pressure and what your doctor's having you do is not working, then get a second opinion, preferably from a specialist, Because listen, you could actually be suffering from this condition and not even know it, which really means that your uncontrolled blood pressure can potentially be putting you at a risk for a stroke or heart attack. Not good, my man. Not good at all. And that's the frustrating part for some of these physicians that actually consider this condition is that they know that there are effective treatments for this primary aldosteronism. But if no one diagnoses it, it can't be treated, And it's also harder to study when it's so rarely diagnosed. So it's kind of like, we're on this little hamster wheel. They say that, that current estimates suggest that around 20% of people with uncontrolled hypertension, despite taking up to 3 or more blood pressure medications, may actually be struggling with this relatively treatable disorder. disorder. Think about that. Is that you? Hopefully not, but it's something to think about if you ask me, especially since the management of, this condition depends on the type that's diagnosed. And so it might include medications to block the effect of a specific hormone in the adrenal gland called aldosterone, or might even be surgery to remove one of the two adrenal glands. There's kind of a broad spectrum of treatments, There's even talk about implementing some technology in the form of an alert from within a medical record system that basically automatically looks at different indicators in your record and then basically sounds an alarm, literally, for your doctor that recommends that they look into testing for the condition. Now, this one perked up my ears and, kind of got me to raise my eyebrow and essentially pucker my lips like, what you talking about there, Willis? Because as you know, I'm myself by trade, I'm an IT professional. And so I'm into all aspects of technology. And so when I heard this and how they were thinking about getting all major electronic medical record companies to implement this, I've got to say that I got a little happy, I got a little bit happy. And then my engineering mind starts going crazy and I start thinking about all the technical parts needed to make that happen, which in actuality wouldn't be too difficult. But I think the hard part would be the whole buy-in portion of this setup, this solution. And by that, I mean, everyone from the EMR companies right down to the doctors using them. And to be honest with you, I don't think many doctors would appreciate a piece of software telling them how to do their job. But listen, the more you know, the better you'll be. And so with all that said and done, let's switch gears and move on to our second segment, Mighty Man. And so in this segment, in this installment of Mighty Man, we're talking about what you need to know if you can't touch your toes. I kind of like that. It has a little jingle to it. So let me ask you a question. Can you touch your toes? It's a pretty simple question. Let me know in the comments if touching your toes is problematic or not. Because if you can't, then that might be your body trying to tell you something and you not listening. So if you're an active type of guy, then you most likely set aside some time for aerobic or cardio exercise to improve your heart health. Am I right? You may even carve out a few hours a week for strength training to build or maintain muscle mass, right? Let me know. But how much focus and emphasis are you putting on flexibility training? Let me know in the comments. Drop it down there. Because this is important because even though it's often neglected, improving your flexibility is a critical part of maintaining an overall healthy body. Regular stretching can really help improve your posture, relieve muscle tension. It might even reduce your risk of injury, So how many of you guys remember the old sit and reach test in your elementary school PE class? Believe it or not, I can still remember those times. And what I remember wasn't pretty. It kind of went like this. They'd call my name. I'd walk up and sit down next to the, this blue piece of tape that they had laid out on the floor. And I'd adjust myself so that both of my feet were aligned with that, blue tape. Are you guys remembering this? Do you guys remember that? How flexible were you? Let me tell you that I personally wasn't all that flexible back then. So my flexibility problems started way back in grade school. You know what I mean? And now I've got to say that I was quite the chunky kid, if you know what I mean. They used to call me, quote unquote, husky. I was considered the husky child. And to this day, I still have some flexibility problems. I mean, over the years, I've gotten better, mostly because I started doing yoga a good 10 years ago now. Now that sounds like a long time, but to be honest, it wasn't really consistent. And I struggled to reach my toes sometimes during, a yoga section, depending on what I was doing the day before and what time of the day it was and all sorts of things. There'd be times where I'd struggle to touch my toes, but I haven't totally abandoned the whole stretching and the yoga thing. And I urge you to give it a shot and not to give up if you're like me, and super tight in the hammies and the hip flexors. So if and when you start, take note of your sticking points, For example, like chronically tight hamstrings as I said, or stiff hip flexors, and really listen to your body, and if you can't figure out exactly what your hang up is, and these 3 tips from a physical therapist at Bespoke Treatments in New York City will absolutely help you improve your flexibility and finally allow you or get you to touch your toes. And now, just so that we're on the same page, let's remember that we're using the old sit and reach test from, grade school years. If you've never done this before, it's super simple. Like as I explained earlier, you just start by sitting down on the floor with your legs stretched out straight in front of you, your feet together, and your hands at your side. Easy peasy, simple, nothing to it. Now, reach your hands out in front of you and stack them one on top of the other with your palms down. Once you're at that point, then you simply stretch and see how far down your legs you can reach. You might be at your knees, you might be at your shins, at your toes, or maybe even past your toes, who knows? And if you're actually past your toes, then your flexibility is pretty damn good. If you're a good 6 inches or more past your toes, then you're doing really good. Personally, I'm barely at my toes at this point, which for me is actually really good because just a few years back, I wasn't even able to reach past my shins on a good day, but here's what to keep an eye out when you're doing these assessments on yourself. And let me jump in here again real quick and just say that you can actually do this test standing up too. You don't have to be sitting down on the floor if you don't, if you prefer not to, if you'd rather not be on the floor, you know what I mean? Here's what to keep in mind or to keep an eye out for and what your body is trying to tell you. First, if you feel tugging in the back of your legs, then this is a good indicator that you might have weak hamstrings. So sometimes weakness in the body can be misunderstood or misinterpreted as poor flexibility. But in actuality, feeling a tugging sensation or tightness in the back of your legs as you reach for your toes, that may actually be a sign of weak hamstrings and not a lack of flexibility, to be honest with you. So adding hamstring stretching exercise can go a long way to helping you improve your range of motion. So loaded mobility and strengthening exercise can really help you achieve that long-lasting change in your flexibility that you're looking for. And it can also decrease the sensations of tightness in your hammies. Now, one exercise to try in the gym is the Romanian deadlift, or as it's more commonly referred to by the trainers at the gym as RDLs. And throughout the majority of this exercise, your hamstrings lengthen to lift the weight. And so as a result, your hamstrings stay under tension longer, which strengthens them, builds them up, gives them character. And don't forget to foam roll after you work out, because foam rolling your hamstrings and legs in general can really help promote that blood flow, to the muscles, which can then promote relaxation and flexibility in your muscles. And what you should do is you want to try to set aside 60 to 90 seconds of foam rolling for your hamstrings after you exercise. Nothing major, just, 60 to 90 seconds. You just want to give it a quick roll through to get that fresh blood into your hamstrings after the workout. Again, to promote that flexibility, to promote that muscle relaxation, and to release the tension. Simple as that. So here's how you actually do a good RDL or a Romanian deadlift as it's known. So first you stand with your legs at about hip width apart. You can either hold a pair of dumbbells at your sides or a barbell in front of you if that's easier or better or more comfortable. If you're going with the barbell, then make sure to grip the bar with your hands at about shoulder width apart. Once you have that comfortable grip, again, either on the barbell with a shoulder width grip or dumbbells at your sides, then shoot your hips back and bend your knees ever so slightly as you hinge forward. This is not a traditional deadlift where you're powerlifting directly from the floor. It's more of a weighted hinge exercise with a slight bend in your knees, and keeping your back as flat as possible. Now, from your standing position, which is also the starting position, FYI, gently lower the weight toward the ground and keeping it close to your body. So you want to gently lower, the weight as you hinge a bit at the in your back and bend just a little in your knees. And as you lower the weight, you don't want to go any further than about, the halfway point of your shins. That's like the money spot. That's the Goldilocks zone, I suppose, if you will. You'll feel a nice little stretch down the back of your legs, as you lower the weight if you hit that spot just right. And once your upper body is basically parallel to the ground, you reverse the motion and bring your hips forward, returning to that standing position. That's it. That's the whole movement. I try to explain it with as much detail because sometimes these simple movement exercises are they're so simple that they're easy to mess up or do incorrectly. But that's really it. That's all there is to an RDL. That's the whole movement. Now you do that 10 times for one set, take a quick 20 to 30 second break, and then go at it again. I generally do about 5 sets depending on, what else I'm working on in the gym that day. But it's a great little exercise to strengthen your lower back and hamstring. And again, don't forget the lovely foam roller. Really releases the tension in those, those back muscles and the hamstrings. So moving on to the next tip, what if you feel tightness in your hips? Think about it. You're going through the assessment and you feel tightness in your hips. Well, then you might have tight hip flexors, my friend. No surprise there, right? And if you're not already overwhelmed by all the reasons why sitting for hours isn't healthy for you, and here's another one. Tight hips, baby. Your hip flexors, this group of muscles that at the front of your hips, they adapt to being in a shortened position after spending, long periods of time just sitting there. So like me, I have a lot of tightness in my hips because I'm in the IT field. I'm always on the computer. I'm always sitting down, and those hip flexors, that's a problem area for me. And when they're chronically shortened, like I said, from a desk job, then your hip flexors pull on your pelvis, and that causes your pelvis to tip forward. And this forward tilt is also known as an anterior pelvic tilt. This pelvic tilt then places tension on your hamstrings even before you begin to reach for your toes. So go think about, keep that in mind. Now, I don't think I have to tell you that doesn't leave much room for stretching if your hamstrings are already at their limit. You know what I mean? So if at all possible, you want to stand up and move around throughout the day for at least a few quick minutes here and there. Like literally set an alarm on your phone or fitness tracker, your Fitbit or whatever you have, if you have to, so that it reminds you to stand up every hour or so. Or maybe even consider investing in a standing desk to give your hip flexors a chance to stretch to a more natural position. And while we're talking about stretching, make sure to stretch your hip flexors properly. That's always the key, is that properly. Even a simple kneeling hip flexor stretch is a good way to maintain that mobility through through your hips. And these are really super simple to do. All you have to do is kneel on the ground with your right leg out in front of you, bent at a 90 degrees. Then place the left knee on the ground for support, easy peasy. Right foot out in front of you, bent at a 90 degree, left knee on the ground for support. Then tuck your hips slightly and begin to lean into your right knee. You should feel a nice little stretch along the front of your left hip. Sit on that. Sit on it for about 30 seconds, then switch sides. Easy peasy. Man, just thinking about this, I want to do it right now. And now for that last tip before I wrap up this podcast episode with a nice little bow for you. Again, you're going through the assessment. Think about this, work with me here. You're going through the assessment and you feel a pinch in your lower back. Well, this might be your body telling you that you have poor nerve mobility. You see, your muscles aren't the only potential barriers to touching your toes. If you start to feel a pinch in your lower back that shoots down your legs, you might be experiencing tension in your nervous system. Now, luckily, I've never really experienced this tension, this type of nervous system tension. Not in my legs anyway. You know, I've felt that in other parts of my body, but certainly not something that shoots down my legs. But ideally, our nerves should be able to slide and move independently from other muscles and tissues surrounding them, you know? But poor nerve mobility will cause tension during an otherwise innocent movement, you know? And it'll most likely start in your lower back or in the back of your legs. So a mobility exercise like an active hamstring stretch can really help release this tension. Another thing to keep in mind when it comes to your sciatica nerve is your posture. By the way, that's the main nerve there that you would feel if it's pinched wrong. And to be more specific, when I'm talking about your posture, I'm referring to your sitting posture. So you see, since the sciatica nerve comes from the spine, your sitting posture is super important. So make sure to have your lower back supported properly at all times. And if you're sitting for a long time, maybe keep a pillow on your chair for, a little added support. But as far as the active hamstring stretch, as far as that's concerned, this is another simple one to do, just like the other two exercises. So you start by, lying on your back with your legs straight out and arms at your sides. Easy peasy, like I said. Then you raise your right leg up toward the sky, keeping it straight. And then grab the back of your thigh with both hands, And what you're going to do is that you're going to slowly pull your leg in toward you until you feel a stretch on the back of your leg. Then, keeping your knee in place and still facing the ceiling, lower your heel toward the ground and then raise it back up again. Now, you're going to lower and raise the bottom part of your legs several times to loosen the hamstring, and then simply switch legs and repeat the exercise. And that's pretty much it. Like I said, easy peasy. And with those 3 super simple stretching exercises, you can easily loosen up those muscles that are keeping you from touching your toes. And you have to remember that flexibility is everything. Like, in my opinion, if you're not flexible to a certain degree, then you're going to have trouble staying in shape. I see a lot of older people, in my age range that look so restricted when they're working out. Like, we're all trying to do a simple squat, let's say. They can barely get down past a 75-degree angle bend in their knee. Now, I know that there are other reasons why this could possibly be happening to them. I understand that. But I'm certain to almost 100% certainty that if they added some simple stretching routines to their day, they'd get so much more out of their workouts. I'm a big proponent of yoga, and it's because yoga has literally changed my life. No lie. I used to be one of those stiff, no bend at the knee type of people, but then a wise man told me once, he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, I don't remember exactly how it goes, it just came to me. He says, I'm in super great shape, not because I can do 50 push-ups, not because I can do 100 pull-ups. I'm in great shape because I do yoga. Yoga has allowed me to reach my full potential. Now, again, this is me paraphrasing this because I can't remember off the top of my head the exact quote, but that was more or less what he said. It was a great one. When I heard that, I muscled through the workout, and right at the end he says that, and I just it just hit me like a ton of bricks, So actually, bonus points for anyone who drops the name of the person who said this down in the comments. I'd like to know if this makes sense to you. Have you heard this before? Have you been through the workout? Do you know who I'm talking about? Drop it in the comments. I'm gonna send you out something personally, because that's who I am. That's how I roll. And so, with all that said and done, that's it, you guys. That's my show for today. I hope you found some valuable information here. And if nothing else, I hope I've entertained you for a few minutes and was able to bring you a little manly sunshine to your day. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to listen to me. It's very much appreciated. On next week's episode, we'll be talking about the one exercise that promotes better posture, nicer abs, and functional movement. So you definitely don't want to miss out on that. And if you'd like to continue the conversation with me, then get on over to podcast.daspination.com/VIP to get on the VIP Insiders community, where I share even more raw behind the scenes stories, tips, and hacks that'll keep you feeling younger and younger each and every day. That's podcast.daspination.com/VIP. Again, that's podcast.daspination.com/VIP. Be in the know starting right now. Also, don't forget to rate me on Apple Podcasts or wherever it is that you're listening to this episode right now. And leave me a nice, fat, juicy 5-star review and some absolutely beautiful words of why you love the show so much. It really helps me get the word out, and it's honestly the one place where your vote truly matters. Until our next chat, take care now. Bye.